Thank you very much indeed. Esteemed colleagues, Head of Nation, Supreme Justice, Prime Minister and Head of Administration, and Ministers, and most importantly, my committee chairs. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to report back to you on my first year as your Chair of Parliament. It's impossible to upstage what we've just seen. Oftentimes, we do our politics, but we forget that we have an exciting mission. I'm actually inspired to remember why we're here. In this presentation, I'd like to take you through what I've been doing in attempting to serve you over the last 9 months. I'll take you through a brief history of Parliament's progress, parliamentary milestones of the first year, which I confess aren't quite as glamorous as the video, but they're important to us. Lessons learned, specific parliamentary goals, and my personal goals for the next year as well. Well, the story so far, you could say in the beginning was the word, and the word was Asgardia. Until our head of nation, Dr. Asher Bailey, actually took the initiative to create this environment, there was no political structure whatever, apart from terrestrial nations competing for space in space. And Dr. Asher Bailey realized that is not a sustainable way for us to operate as a species or as a planet in the rest of the cosmos. As a result of that, we have been brought together by the unfailing and stubborn belief of Dr. Asher Bailey that there has to be a better way than a space race based on war rather than peace and the peaceful work of humanity in the cosmos. That's a moment in history I will never forget. That's the moment of the inauguration of the first head of nation of Asgardia. You, I think, almost all of you were there last year. It was also one of the most nervous moments of my life. And I can share a secret now. The Supreme Justice and myself may look calm there. We weren't calm. We spent 3 hours practicing 40 words each because the recording, the visual recording of that moment is a historical moment. And hundreds of years from now, when Asgardia is the established political entity in space, citizens of the solar system and beyond will look at that and admire the fact that one man brought us all together. And I think we should give him a round of applause for that. And in so doing, I have to say he's changed the direction of my life too. And I'll say a word or two about that at the end. This was the first physical sitting of Parliament in Vienna in June 2018. It was an enormous undertaking. There are individuals in this room who made that possible, and I have to give a special mention to Linda Luce, who you all know, and has the steadiness that stops panic from coming when panic is deserved. And Alessia and others have done an absolutely tremendous job of keeping this ship stable, and they deserve a round of applause as well, I think. That first sitting was, in a sense, experimental. People don't set up nations very often. And a lot of what we did was being done for the first time. As a result of that, my judgment is we did well. We worked together, there was a collective interest, and on that day, on those days, friendships were formed which I know will last a lifetime and will last a space-time, because I have no doubt that some of those individuals will end up in space. The progress of Parliament after that momentous few days here in Vienna has been steady and quite rapid. We have had to create new systems which have never existed before. For example, the verification of members of Parliament. Being a member of Parliament is a serious business, except perhaps during Brexit. But as far as our business is concerned, 100+ members of Parliament have had to begin from ground zero to put our parliamentary system into a stable orbit. And to give you one example, the verification process had to be designed from the bottom up. This is a picture of the first major verification outside of the original Vienna event. This took place in Istanbul. And we defined and applied a system which has actually worked without modification ever since. And I'm delighted that so many individuals helped with that procedure. We've been to Vienna, Istanbul, Cape Town, London, Venice, and in America and Russia and elsewhere. It's a rigorous system. It's a tough test, but it proves that the people who join Asgardia in a parliamentary sense are who they say they are and what they say they are. And I think that is one of the great qualities of our parliament. It's no accident that our parliament is the highest educated political structure on earth. And I think it's necessary given the size of our task. We had the first digital sitting last year. Once again, a small number of us assembled here in Vienna, and no one had ever done it before. We designed a structure in terms of the procedures based on experience to some extent, but also based on logic. Because if you think about it, everything in our digital sittings can work even if we have space-based AMPs. To achieve that was more difficult than a simple terrestrial parliament, but we have achieved that. It is a monumental achievement that we have individuals from every continent meeting in a professional manner, discussing serious issues and making long-standing legislation which will last the test of time. Since then, we've had a number of other sittings, and I hope that colleagues agree that the quality of our debate has matured, and we have defined a culture which nobody else in politics has ever done. The fact that we do not have political parties is one of the huge motivations for me to have re-entered politics, because in my judgment we have proved that parties divide but people unite. And therefore we don't have factions. We have groups of interests, we have individuals who disagree, but always in the collective interest of the head of nation's vision to have a permanent space habitation by 2043 in Earth years. I also want to thank you, because AMPs are patient when things are challenging or when we have technical issues or when we try something new. But to give you one example of our success, we're now beginning to have occasional breakout rooms for languages, a promise that I made and a promise which has been kept by our technical team. As we develop that, we lead the world in virtual politics. And we do it in a way that I've never experienced before. When I was a British politician, you had to suspect the other parties and distrust your own. Now, I trust my colleagues and actually do not suspect in any way that we're here for different reasons. We're all here for a collective interest. We've also introduced something which wasn't in the Constitution or the rules, but seemed to me necessary. The ability of Parliament to regularly meet and discuss issues to solve problems. We have what we call the Zoom sessions, weekly digital sessions, once again a world first, and once again very challenging for our technical team initially. We have a weekly session, if you think about this, of members of Parliament from all over the world. The disadvantage of not having a flat earth is that some people have to get up in the middle of the night. The advantage of having today's technology is that we are able to meet without latency, without lag, where everybody has the same voice, whether they live in Cape Town or Japan or Azerbaijan or New York or even London. And we do it as if it's normal. Think about that. We get together as if it's normal to have a global parliament that meets for an hour or two every week. No one has done this before. And back to my original point, that can be replicated when we live in space. Once we're in Mars, we'll have to wait for a while for the answers, but I'll probably not be Chair of Parliament then. That's someone else's problem. And we've also done it with that collective sense of purpose which the head of nation knew was possible. Here are some milestones, in my view, in our Parliament. We've got the first space-friendly political structure ever in terms of the processes I've described. A virtual committee system which works. We have 12 committees which do work, which solve problems, which get together in a way that far exceeds anything any one person can manage. And it's a credit to you as chairs of your committees that you're making them work. We have a committee government cooperation which is unheard of in any modern democracy. The greatest ally I have to help Parliament work is a Prime Minister who understands the role and devotes herself and her life to making that government successful. And I pay tribute to Ana Mercedes Diaz, with whom I meet 2 times a week, because on the bad days she makes things better. On the good days she makes things best. And I think we should show our appreciation to the Prime Minister as well. We've managed to avoid negative confrontational systems. We have arguments sometimes, but they're done in the context of trying to solve problems, not to defeat people, but to defeat issues. And we don't win victories over each other, we win victories over adversity. And that's an exciting aspect of this too. And I have to say, one of the most inspiring presentations I've seen, right at the heart of what we do, was the work of our Minister of Science, Floris, who really understands what it takes to build space. He looks further than anyone else I've had the honour to meet, with the possible exception of my grandfather, who was also comparably visionary. But Floris, thank you for what you do, because you remind me that all of the rest of it is worth it. And Minister Spilsky will find you that 1.5 trillion euros you need by the end of the year so that you can continue your work. We've got no political parties to create that distracting conflict, and I hope that will always be the case in our nation. And we've got a willingness to explore possibilities. When we have an issue, we don't say, well, that's just the way it is. We say, how do we fix it? It's always how, not, oh, well, we've lost now. And that self-belief, I think, has actually built the confidence of our society and our Parliament, for which I believe the motto is that we should default to stability under stress. Parliamentary milestones also include the first strategy for permanent space habitation. We haven't got an option on this one. Dr. Ashabeli said we have to be living in space by 2043. That's 0027 in the Asgardian calendar. 12 areas are being involved by committees, and it seems so far that they cover everything we have to do. It is a tremendous insight from the outset. We're beginning to reach out to the wider public, and we've got friendships across the world, both within Asgardia and between Asgardia and other nations. We've also proved that outreach is possible. Ben Dell, the chair of the Citizenship Committee, convinced me to go down to Cape Town, where there was such a big water shortage, they had taken all the plugs out of the bath so you couldn't have a bath. He didn't tell me that before I went. What I also discovered was that he had laid the groundwork for us to meet the future premier of that state, and he also had organised television interviews and other media, which immediately increased the number of Asgardians on that continent by a large percentage. And that, to me, was a template of what we can achieve. Lessons have also been learned. Translation facility is vital. I still say the single most pressing need for me is to make sure that nobody is excluded from our political systems through the barrier of language. And I'm very grateful for the fact that we have made a start. We have Russian and Spanish, which covers a lot of people. I'll settle when we have all 12 languages represented. And I predict when we do that, the membership of Asgardia will increase in those areas where the language isn't always represented. Participation is key. I've learned that. And the Zoom lessons, the Zoom sessions prove it as well, because it delivers a direct and immediate feedback to me, for example, when I can do things better, and also some inspirational ideas. And we had some examples of that yesterday, giving us ideas for 2 of the forthcoming Zoom sessions. AMP views should be heard and acted on, and that's been a frustration with AMPs. But in this digital session, for the first time, we've really taken on board examples of what we call 30-plus proposals, those proposals supported by at least 30 AMPs, and we discussed them. John Fine and Luca Ceriso Valvo were the pioneers for that, the Yuri Gagarins of politics, if you like, for us. And feedback should be encouraged. And I'm glad that I get honest feedback, sometimes uncomfortable, but that means I can make a difference. And I notice also that colleagues in Parliament and in government take feedback too. Looking ahead, then, the parliamentary goals should be these. Committee and ministerial joint results delivery. Once again, a milestone in politics. Having a committee system that supports government instead of seeks to attack it. Economic progress with a net surplus, which is a big demand for Minister Spilsky, but it's our joint responsibility to help him achieve that. And I was really impressed and delighted to see yesterday's first quarter report, because we're on a professional and surplus-based, potential for surplus-based footing. Citizenship structures in place and active, and we had a great debate about this yesterday in the parliamentary digital session with the chair of the Citizenship Committee and the Minister working together. An outreach strategy operated by AMPs, and I think we need to do a lot more of that in this year. Mayor's role, defined and measurable targets, and that's something that we've also got to do, seeing the mayors as a kind of ambassadorial group. Bilateral agreements with at least 6 Earth nations, and the head of nation is clear what he wants in terms of those figures. Establishment of embassies as well, and I believe at least 10% of the human race should have heard of Asgardia by the end of 2019. In fact, they already have, because we had that kind of reach when we first inaugurated our head of nation. But I'd like them to be able to name Asgardia rather than just have seen it. Here are my personal goals as your Chair of Parliament: to be available to AMPs formally and informally. I always want to be there for those AMPs, and also especially for the chairs. To find solutions to process issues. I am inundated with communications through Skype, Zoom, mobile phone, text, WhatsApp, Telegram, and email, and eventually, if all else fails, you send me a letter by post. And I need to make sure that I have a good process to communicate, and that's something I think I can improve on. Build work ethic between Parliament and government. There's nothing wrong there, but now that we have a government, it's my job to serve the Prime Minister by making it easy for the chairs and the ministers and the AMPs to work together. To reach out to link with other parliaments, and we haven't really even started that, but I intend to work with the new chair of our Foreign Affairs Committee to create the Inter-Parliamentary Union, where we will actually meet on a speaker-to-speaker basis and a minister-to-minister basis and prime minister-to-prime minister basis. And when we sign those bilateral agreements, unquestionably the head of nation too. And multilingual translation for weekly sessions for the reasons I said before. Colleagues and friends, we're together because one visionary's ambition is now Asgardia's mission. And I actually believe that we are creating one unity and one humanity, because we are actually a nation united, and we can maybe unite nations through that process. I'm really proud of this year. It's changed my life because this is what I do now. And my friends say, "How are the little green men?" I say, "They're a little bit bigger than you think." And I feel also that in 12 months' time, we won't be telling people, "Would you like to join us?" They'll be saying, "We'd like to join you," as individuals and as nations. If I can be part of that process, then I hope that my grandfather will be proud wherever he is now, and I hope that I can make you, as the Parliament that I serve, and as the head of nation, who I'm honoured to serve, proud as well. Thank you very much.